Famous people who passed away in 1768. Before we proceed, please subscribe to our channel to support us. Francis Fouquier. He was born in 1733 and he died in March 1768. His age was 65 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British colonial administrator who served as Lieutenant Governor of Virginia from 1758 to 1768. He emigrated to the British colony of Virginia to take up the office of Lieutenant Governor, a teacher and a close friend of Thomas Jefferson. He frequently hosted lavish parties for the American gentry as governor. J.O. Brandt. He was born in June 1694 and he died in April 1768. His age was 73 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was prostate cancer. He was a Swedish chemist and mineralogist who discovered cobalt in 1735. He was the first person to discover a metal unknown in ancient times. He's also known for exposing fraudulent alchemists operating during his lifetime. Benjamin Tasker. He was born in 1690 and he died in June 1768. His age was 78 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was the 21st proprietary governor of Maryland from 1752 to 1753. He also occupied a number of other significant colonial offices, including, on various occasions, being elected mayor of Annapolis. John Mitchell. He was born in April 1711 and he died in February 1768. His age was 56 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a colonial American physician and botanist. He created the most comprehensive and perhaps the largest 18th century map of eastern North America, known today as the Mitchell Map, first published in 1755. In conjunction with the imminent 7 Years' War, the map was subsequently used during the Treaty of Paris in 1783 to define the boundaries of the newly independent United States, and has been resolving border disputes since. Conrad Beissel. He was born in March 1691 and he died in July 1768. His age was 77 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German-born religious leader who in 1732 founded the Ephrata community in the province of Pennsylvania, a key figure in the pietistic religious movements in colonial America. Beissel served as the community's composer as well as its spiritual leader. He devised his own system of musical composition intended to simplify the process by relying on predetermined sequences of master notes and servant notes to create harmony. Thomas Pelham Holmes. He was born in July 1693 and he died in November 1768. His age was 75 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English Whig statesman who served as the Prime Minister of Great Britain and whose official life extended throughout the Whig supremacy of the 18th century. He is commonly known as the Duke of Newcastle. He had also served as Secretary of State continuously for 30 years and dominated British foreign policy. Sir Walter Baggot, 5th Baronet. He was born in August 1702 and he died in January 1768. His age was 65 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English Tory politician who sat in the House of Commons between 1724 to 1768, known for his involvement in English politics and letters. He made his only recorded speech on 26 February 1735 when he moved unsuccessfully for a clause to be included in the Mutiny Bill, which would allow newly enlisted soldiers to obtain their immediate discharge if they wanted. Sir Robert Rich, 4th Baronet. He was born in July 1685 and he died in February 1768. His age was 82 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British cavalry officer. As a junior officer, he fought the Battle of Schellenberg and at the Battle of Blenheim during the War of the Spanish Succession. He was then asked to raise a regiment to combat the threat of Jacobite rising in 1715. He also served with the Pragmatic Army during the Earl of Stair, at the Battle of Dettingen during the War of the Austrian Succession. Robert Smith. He was born in October 1689 and he died in February 1768. His age was 78 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English mathematician from 1716 to 1760. He was a Plumian professor of astronomy. In February 1719, he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society. Smith helped to spread Isaac Newton's ideas in Europe, and Newton's success in optics and mechanics dominated Smith's scientific career. Hans von Leybold. He was born in June 1685 and he died in November 1768. His age was 83 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Prussian general, field marshal. He joined the military in 1700 and participated in all Prussian field operations from the War of Spanish Succession through the 7 Years' War. He served with particular distinction in Frederick the Great's War, with the Austrians in the Silesia and the 7 Years' War. Thomas Sacker. He was born in September 1693 and he died in August 1768. His age was 74 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Archbishop of Canterbury in the Church of England, who advocated for modernization within the Church of England. In 1737, he became the Bishop of Oxford and then the Dean of St. Paul's Cathedral, London in 1750. In April 1758, a month later, after the death of his predecessor, he became Archbishop of Canterbury. Nathaniel Lardner. He was born in June 1684 and he died in July 1768. His age was 84 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English Presbyterian minister and theologian, known for his critical theological works. He made a case against the subordinationism of Samuel Clarke, in which the eternal Logos unites with the human body in the man Jesus, opposed to the Trinitarian view. George Dance the Elder. He was born in 1695 and he died in February 1768. His age was 73 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a British architect and was a City of London surveyor and architect from 1735 until his death. He pioneered the neoclassical style in British architecture. He was appointed as a clerk of the City Works of the City of London in 1734. Shortly before taking up the post, he had won a major commission from the city for the Mansion House, the new residence of the Lord Mayor. He was one of 3 architects who had been invited to submit designs. Robert Simpson. He was born in October 1687 and he died in October 1768. His age was 80 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Scottish mathematician and professor of mathematics at the University of Glasgow. The Simon line is named after him. Simon's contributions to mathematical knowledge took the form of critical additions and commentaries on the works of the ancient geometers. Arthur Onslow. He was born in October 1691 and he died in February 1768. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English politician who set a record for length of service when repeatedly elected to serve as Speaker of the House of Commons, where he was known for his integrity. Onslow's speakership was distinguished by his great integrity in a corrupt and jobbing age. His great achievement as Speaker was to assert the independence, authority, and impartiality of that post. Sarah Fielding. She was born in November 1710 and she died in April 1768. Her age was 58 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was an English author and sister of the playwright, novelist, and magistrate Henry Fielding. She wrote The Governess, or The Little Female Academy, in 1749, thought to be the first novel in English aimed expressly at children. Earlier, she had success with her novel The Adventures of David Simner in 1744. James Short. He was born in June 1710 and he died in June 1768. His age was 57 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Scottish mathematician and manufacturer of optical instruments, principally telescopes. During his 35 years career as a telescope maker, he produced approximately 1360 scientific instruments. Canaletto. He was born in October 1697 and he died in April 1768. His age was 70 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian painter from the Republic of Venice, considered an important member of the 18th century Venetian school. He was a master of cityscape painting, especially of Venice. He was further an important paint maker, using the etching technique in the period of 1746 to 1756. He worked in England. John Bristow. He was born in August 1698 and he died in May 1768. His age was 67 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English merchant, financier, and politician who sat in the House of Commons from 1734 to 1768. He played a key role in early colonial trade adventures. In 1739, on the outbreak of war with Spain, he and his partner, Peter Burrell, were granted contracts for remitting money for all the forces in Gibraltar, Minorca, and Jamaica. Harry Grey, 4th Earl of Stamford. He was born in June 1750 and he died in May 1768. His age was 52 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English peer known for his estate management and political career. In 1738, he represented Leicestershire in the British House of Commons. He had inherited the Grey estates at the Bradgate Park in Leicestershire and Enville in Staffordshire, but decided to make Enville Hall the family seat. Bradgate House was therefore bricked up and the park there kept for hunting and game. Johann Joachim Winckelmann. He was born in December 1717 and he died in June 1768. His age was 50 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was homicide. He was a German art historian and archaeologist. He was a pioneering Hellenist who first articulated the differences between Greek, Greco-Roman, and Roman art, considered the father of modern art, history, and archaeology. George Hadley, he was born in February 1685 and he died in June 1768. His age was 83 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an English lawyer and amateur meteorologist who proposed the atmospheric mechanism by which the trade winds are sustained, which is now named in his honor as Hadley circulation, as a key factor in ensuring that European sailing vessels reached the North American shores. Understanding the trade winds was becoming a matter of great importance at the time. José de Nebra, he was born in January 1702 and he died in July 1768. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Spanish composer. His work combines Spanish traditions with the Italian style of his day, renowned for blending Baroque and Spanish musical styles. More than 170 works by Nebra still survive. Antoine de Pauxil, he was born in October 1703 and he died in September 1768. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French mathematician. He attended the school of Saint Florent for 10 years while working on his family farm, made advances in probability and demographic studies. In 1758, he was elected a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences. Louis VIII, Landgrave of Hesse-Darmstadt, he was born in April 1691 and he died in October 1768. His age was 77 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Landgrave of Hesse and Darmstadt from 1739 to 1768, noted for his patronage of arts and sciences. He was not a gifted economist, and only his good friendship with the Empress Maria Theresa and her intervention at the Imperial Court Council kept the Landgravate from the bankruptcy. However, his caring for his country is documented by the establishment of a textile house in 1742 and a state orphanage in the 1746. Elsie Morley, she was born in 1713 and she died in 1768. Her age was 55 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was accident. She was an alewife who lived in Picktree near Chester Street, County Durham, England. This is close to Hareton Hall, the home of Lambton family. A song and jig tune bearing her name, popular in her lifetime, are still played locally. Joseph Nicolas de Lille, he was born in April 1688 and he died in September 1768. His age was 80 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French astronomer and cartographer. He is mostly known for the de Lille scale, a temperature scale he invented in 1732. He was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society in 1725 and a foreign member of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences in 1749. Francesco Maria Veracini, he was born in February 1690 and he died in October 1768. His age was 78 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian composer and violinist. Perhaps he is best known for his sets of violin sonatas. As a composer, according to Manfred Buchholzer, his individual, if not subjective, style has no precedent in Baroque music and clearly heralds the end of the entire era. Michel Blavet, He was born in March 1700 and he died in October 1768. His age was 64 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French composer and flute virtuoso. Although he taught himself to play almost every instrument, he specialized in the bassoon and the flute, which he held to the left, the opposite of how most flutists hold theirs today. Hermann Samuel Reimarus. He was born in December 1694 and he died in March 1768. His age was 73 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a German philosopher and writer of the Enlightenment who is remembered for his deism, the doctrine that human reason can arrive at a knowledge of God, and ethics from a study of nature and our own internal reality, thus eliminating the need for religions based on revelation. Nicola Porpora. He was born in August 1686 and he died in March 1768. His age was 81 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian composer and teacher of singing of the Baroque era, whose most famous singing students were the Castrati Farinelli and Caffarelli. Other students included composers Johann Adolf Hayes, Matteo Capranica, and Joseph Haydn. Giovanni Battista Vaccarini. He was born in February 1702 and he died in March 1768. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Sicilian architect notable for his work in Sicilian Baroque style in his homeland during the period of massive rebuilding following the earthquake of 1693. Many of his principal works can be found in the area in and around Catania. Carlo Innocenzo Fragoni. He was born in November 1692 and he died in December 1768. His age was 76 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was an Italian poet and librettist. As a poet, Fragoni was one of the best of the school of the Arcadian Academy, and his lyrics and pastorals had great facility and elegance. His collected works were published at Parma in 10 volumes in 1799, and a more complete edition appeared at Lucca in the same year in 15 volumes. Lawrence Sterne. He was born in November 1713 and he died in March 1768. His age was 54 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was tuberculosis. He was an Anglo-Irish novelist and Anglican cleric who wrote the novels The Life and Opinions of Tristram Shandy, Gentleman and a Sentimental Journey Through France and Italy, published sermons and memoirs, and indulged in local politics. He grew up in a military family, traveling mainly in Ireland but briefly in England. Vasily Tradiakovsky. He was born in March 1703 and he died in August 1768. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a Russian poet, essayist, and playwright who helped lay the foundations of classical Russian literature, a pioneer in standardizing Russian literary style. He was also a prolific translator of classical authors, medieval philosophers, and French literature. His translations frequently aroused the ire of the censors, and he fell into disfavor with his academy superiors and conservative court circles. Jean-Denis Diver. He was born in July 1702 and he died in December 1768. His age was 66 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French Jesuit painter and missionary to Qin, China, known for his work as a missionary artist in Qin dynasty. He went to China in 1737 and was given the title Painter to the Emperor by the Qing Emperor because the emperor insisted on the use of Chinese painting methods and styles. Attiray's painting eventually became entirely Chinese in style. Most of his works were paintings of natural objects such as trees, fruits, fish, and other animals, done on glass or silk. Pierre-Simon Fournier. He was born in September 1712 and he died in October 1768. His age was 56 at the time of his death, and the reason for his death was undisclosed. He was a French mid-18th century punch cutter, type founder, and typographic theoretician. He was both a collector and originator of types. His contributions to printing were his creation of initials and ornaments, his design of letters, and his standardization of type sizes. He worked in the Rococo form and designed typefaces including Fournier and Narcissus. Ulla Tassin. She was born in May 1711 and she died in December 1768. Her age was 57 at the time of her death, and the reason for her death was undisclosed. She was a Swedish courtier, letter writer, and dilettante artist. The Tassins were leading members of the interest in amateur theater within the Swedish aristocracy, which attracted the interest of theater. That laid the foundation of the first professional Swedish language theater in Bålhuset in 1737. Thanks for watching the video. Please don't forget to give us a like.